Hello and welcome to our next reflection on the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Today we talk about the fifth commandment, you shall not kill. All life is sacred because God is the source of all life. The All-Holy One is the source of life. Everything that we have, that we enjoy, is dependent on this gift of life, that we haven't produced for ourselves, we have received. And so it's sacred. In the first pages of the Bible, we are given the story of Cain and Abel that shows to us the effects of human sin, the effects of anger and envy, and to what they can lead in our life. The sin that is crying out to heaven, the shedding of innocent blood, a murder of one brother by another. And so in this fifth commandment, we are reminded of the sacredness of life from its very beginning to its natural end. As we go through life, we have a desire to preserve it, to maintain it. And so we can use legitimate defense in order to guard ourselves, in order to maintain our life. It may result that in this legitimate defense of my own life, the aggressor who tries to take away my life might themselves lose their own life. As long as I don't have the intention of killing somebody whilst defending myself, I am able to legitimately defend my own right to life. And so what is prohibited by the fifth commandment is the intentional killing of another. That is a gravely sinful action. The unintentional killing, anything to do with the intention of indirectly bringing about a person's death, is forbidden. So anything that goes above and beyond a legitimate self-defense is prohibited here by the fifth commandment. The sin of abortion, again teaching us, reminding us that life is to be respected and protected absolutely from conception until natural end. The Church is teaching us that the human embryo, from the very beginning, from the conception, is recognized as a human person and needs to have the rights of any other human person. And the most important one is the right to life. And so since the first century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. And the Church attaches to this action the penalty of excommunication. And that means that we can no longer receive the sacraments. We need to be reconciled with God and with the Church, first of all, before we are welcomed fully into this community. It's not to punish, it's not to throw people out, it's to remind us of the grave sin that abortion is. And so we are reminded to recognize that although this life is not seen by our eyes, it is there, it is developing, it's growing, it's being made ready to enter into this world. And from the very beginning, it is recognized as a human being, as a living person. Because of that, it's also immoral to produce embryos for exploitation, as though it's some useful biological material, either for research or for any other purposes, that you can simply dispose of. It is a human person from the moment of conception, and it is sacred. When it comes to the end of one's life, when we think of euthanasia, whatever its motives and means, it is morally unacceptable. It is an ending of somebody's life. And so the intention, even if the intention might be seemingly good, to reduce the pain and the suffering of the person, is never morally acceptable in the Church's teaching. Suicide Suicide also is against the love of one's own life, against the love of neighbor, and against the love of God. We all have a responsibility for our own life. But again, remember, we are stewards. We are not owners of life, for us to decide what to do with it. And so it's also a grave sin to end one's own life. But the Church also reminds us that we shouldn't despair of the salvation open to the people who have committed suicide. So the Church prays for all those people. There might be various circumstances, various psychological disturbances, various factors that come into play with any of these things that we talk about with reference to this fifth commandment, that might diminish the responsibility of the person who is committing this act. And so we continue to trust in the mercy of God, but we are reminded to be mindful that we are stewards of life. We have received it as a gift. We also need to be mindful of having respect for others. And here we talk about scandal. And so scandal is leading through our attitude or behavior, leading others to do evil. It's really an abuse of power. Scandal is graver if it's committed by people in positions of authority who have a greater responsibility. More is expected of them. But scandal affects any of us. It's about if we are leading others to sin, we are guilty of scandal, of grave sin. Apart from respect for other souls, we need to have respect for health. And so we need to look after ourselves. We need to avoid excess of food, of drink, of addictions, excess of, for example, using drugs. All these things that are harmful to our bodies, that have a destructive effect, not just on our lives, but also through us, on the lives of those around us, of our families. So all these commandments all these things are against that fifth commandment, you shall not kill. To have respect for persons and scientific research, that means there will be possibilities for us to help other people. There are legitimate experiments, legitimate investigations, legitimate research that helps us to maintain our health, that helps us to maintain the health of others. But we need to have limits. And here again we go into very detailed discussions where those limits lie, but we just need to be aware of the limitations. To have respect for our bodily integrity. And so the grave sins against that would be sin of kidnapping, hostage-taking, terrorism, all those things that take away our peace, take away our freedom, that are harmful to us, physically, psychologically, emotionally. These are other ways of killing other people. To have respect for the dead, to ensure as families that our loved ones, if they are Catholic, that they receive the sacraments before they pass on to the Lord. Don't leave it till late. That they are cared for by people. And so even here, when we talk about palliative care, looking after those who are dying, who are in the process of being ready to die, the legitimate use of using painkillers in order to alleviate the pain of those who are suffering, all those things are covered by the fifth commandment. These different ways in which we sin against it is a reminder that our Lord has fulfilled this commandment. He is teaching us, he is saying, it's not just about killing or taking the life of somebody. If you get angry at your brother, you will have to answer for it. And so these are different ways in which we truly contribute to a spiritual death of our own, or maybe of other people. And finally, we talk about the safeguarding of peace. A peace that has to start within our own hearts. And so we need to master the emotions of anger, of hatred. Because underneath it, if we don't do anything with them, we can end up with a desire for revenge. We can harbor it. And that is contrary to charity, contrary to the law and teaching of the gospel. So we need to learn to deal with those strong emotions, strong feelings, before they overtake us, before they lead us into places where we are totally on the wrong path and not responding to this commandment of you shall not kill. And so as nations we have duties. The governments have duties to maintain peace, to avoid war. But it cannot be simply a peace that is based on the absence of war, or simply that the peace is maintained because there is a balance of power. You have lots of arms, you can do us a lot of damage, and so can we to you, and therefore we have peace. That's not peace. The Church is reminding us very clearly. And so the arms race, the production and sale of arms, great businesses in so many instances. But what do they contribute to? In the Church's understanding, these do not contribute to peace in any way. So many challenging things for us to discover with regards to this commandment, as with regards to the other commandments. To recognize the far-reaching consequences of our actions, and to what extent we are living up to this commandment. We are faithful to the commandments of the Lord in our life. So let us continue to pray, not just for ourselves, but for all nations, for all peoples, that we may grow in faithfulness to the commandments of the Lord, and today especially to the fifth commandment, you shall not kill. God bless you.